All right, we're going to get going. Welcome. I'm Rob Greenwood. I'm Executive Director, Public Engagement and the Harris Center. And welcome to Memorial's superb new, it's still new, Amira Innovation Exchange on our Signal Hill campus. And welcome to the Harris Center's Memorial Presents the Future of Rural Development. And this is part of a series the Harris Center has had with several synergy sessions. In addition to all the programming we do, we have several Thriving Regions projects up and running on the Northern Peninsula, Port aux Basques region, Bayvert Peninsula area, 2 more regions later on this year. So it's still a traveling roadshow, but we're very fortunate to have this facility with the webcasting capability. I know there's a group in the Labrador Straits who have a group of people together watching this session, and we are webcasting live, so we'll have participation from around the province and beyond. Few housekeeping items for those people in the room. There are emergency exits right at the back and on either side. If there is any emergency, we muster up by in the back parking lot by the dumpsters. That's not going to happen. Don't want to get blown away here tonight. Washrooms, there is one right outside the door here. It's a single stall, accessible, gender inclusive. And then if you do a U, there's men's and women's on that side. Please turn off your cell phones or put them on silent mode. We will be taking photos during the session, so let us know if you don't want to be in a photo later on. We'll make sure you don't show up in one. We are webcasting, as I mentioned, and people will be able to email in questions during the Q&A. Before we get started, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the territory in which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, and the island of Newfoundland as the ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq and Beothuk. We would also like to recognize the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatuavut, and the Innu of Nitassinan and their ancestors as the original people of Labrador. We strive for respectful relationships with all the peoples of this province as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation and honor this beautiful land together. The format for tonight's session, we have set aside about 20 minutes. We've whittled that down with the agreement of our presenters. So 20 minutes of presentation with 2 speakers. After the initial presentation, we'll have a really amazing panel with discussion, followed by plenty of time for Q&A discussion with the audience here in the room and participating through the internet. For folks watching online, you are welcome to submit your questions at any time during the session. Simply email them to Kathy Newhook at Kathyn, C-A-T-H-Y-N, at mun.ca, and Kathy will read them out at the session, and I'll remind you of that again when we get to the Q&A. As I mentioned, this evening's session is on rural development, a topic close to my heart. I've spent most of my career, all of my career, on this. Amongst other things, but that has always been a central focus. Specifically, what are the best approaches given our current demographic challenges and the ever-increasing shift in population from rural to urban, not just in this province, but worldwide. But also some interesting counter movements. So we're going to learn more about that and unpack that and discuss that. With that, it's my pleasure to turn things over to, after I do their introductions, Doctors Natalie Slawinski and John Schouten. Natalie earned her PhD in Strategic Management from the Richard Ivey School of Business at the University of Western Ontario. Her research focuses on understanding sustainability, temporality, and paradoxes in organizations. Her most recent research examines these themes in the context of social enterprise. And many of us have done work with the business school over the years, and it was always a challenge to get many people in the business school doing a lot of work in rural Newfoundland. There have been some over the years, and there's a real resurgence with the new Center for Social Enterprise, Natalie, John, and several of their colleagues, so it's really great to see. John is Professor of Social Enterprise at Memorial. He specializes in studies of consumer culture and market dynamics using ethnography and other qualitative methods. His past work spans areas of consumer identity, consumption communities, market emergence, alternative research methodologies, and environmental sustainability and human well-being. He now devotes his attention to understanding and facilitating social enterprise from these perspectives. So again, you can see from their research interests and areas of expertise, they're bringing some real new insights and perspectives to the long-standing issues we've all worked on in rural development. And so I think it's a really fruitful discussion and can't wait to hear their presentation. Who's going first? Okay, tag team, away you go. You will be at the mic there and you can step in and out of this.
Clicker there? Yeah.
There's a clicker there. Yep.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Great. Thank you all for coming this evening. So I'm Natalie, and I'll be presenting with John a model called the PLACE model of community development, which is based on an in-depth study that we did on Fogo Island. We have been studying the Shorefast Foundation, now just called Shorefast, which is a registered charity that runs social enterprises on Fogo Island with a team of researchers. Blair Windsor, Mark Stoddart, and Wendy Smith are part of our research team. And it is a SSHRC-funded project. And for those of you who don't know, a social enterprise is an organization that uses business principles in service of achieving a social mission or social goals. Shorefast has a mission of cultural and economic resilience for Fogo Island. And I'll go back to this slide and then I'll pass it on to John in just a moment. What you see here is the Fogo Island Inn, which is one of the social enterprises that is run by Shorefast. And the Fogo Island Inn, when we started this study 7 years ago, was just being built. Today, it is contributing to the economic and cultural well-being of Fogo Island by employing over 200 people and contributing significantly to the GDP of the island. And all of the surpluses of the inn go back to the well-being of the community. When we understand that that what's happening on Fogo Island is quite unique, and that the Shorefast is a unique organization. That said, we decided as a research team that we wanted to figure out what learnings or lessons we could take from our research that might be applied to other contexts and other parts of rural Newfoundland. And so I'll let John talk a little bit about how we did that.
So one of the things we hear a lot, sometimes as a question, sometimes as a complaint, is, but we're not Fogo Island, we don't have a Zeta Cobb, we don't have the deep, deep pockets that funded the magnificent inn on Fogo Island. What does this mean for Norris Point? What does this mean for any one of the Newfoundland outport communities that are struggling to stay alive? And so we decided to put the question to community champions from all over the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. We held a workshop on Fogo Island. We recruited, not exactly recruited, we invited people that we knew were involved in social enterprise or community leadership in some way to come to Fogo Island and talk about some of the lessons that Natalie had brought from, and the research team had brought from the Shorefast research, but to see if those things resonated with them, and if they did, how, and what else we could learn from them. We picked kind of a bad couple of days for the workshop. Storm of the century was the kind of, I've never shaken so hard. I've never been in a house that was literally shaking like a snow globe before, but now I've had that experience. So we, with about, there were 40 of us all together, a handful of researchers and community champions. We worked through power outages. Those are flower vases set on top of iPhones. With the that's how we worked. We had an entire day of pretty much darkness. When the daylight faded, that was our. But we learned some interesting things, and we pulled the findings together into this model that Natalie referred to, and I'm just going to hand it back to her to introduce it.
So the place model, as you can see, has Newfoundland Labrador at its center because it comes out of this place. And we used the acronym of PLACE to highlight that place is at the heart of community development. It takes a deep love and abiding, it requires community development to be successful, requires people, actors, communities to honor and respect their place and draw on it for community development. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you through each of these 5 learnings, and then we're going to dive into the panel discussion after we take you through these 5 learnings, and then we'll have an opportunity to discuss them in more depth after that. So just very quickly, what we learned on Fogo Island is that there are such incredible people in this province who are doing incredible work, and we invited 2 of them here this evening, but there are so many more. So Sonia Mills and Joni Cranston are here on our panel, and both of them have been involved in our workshops as we have talked about how this model applies to other communities. And the critical thing about champions is that not only do they love their place and work very, very hard to improve it, but they also promote other community champions. They gather others who are also passionate about their place, and they rally them. And because the work of community development is very much a collective effort.
One of the things we've run into in the workshops we've done, and there have been 2 so far, is that some of the community champions from some of the places that we've encountered were not born in those places. Some of them actually came from somewhere else and resettled and developed a deep love for the place that they were living in. But the second finding is that we need to be able to link outsiders and insiders for their various perspectives. People who are from a community understand it deeply. They know the people, they know their neighbors, they know the traditions, they know the crafts. People from outside may not have that knowledge, but they bring fresh perspectives. So if I'm living in a place where I grew up all my life, I have certain ways of seeing things that are just very familiar and very comfortable. But somebody comes from outside and sees things differently, and the 2 of us can combine those perspectives and produce new opportunities. And so linking insiders and outsiders seems to be a critical thing. Outsiders may be people that have never lived in the community that move in. They may be people that were born in the community and moved away and gained an outside perspective and then came back. They may be part of a diaspora of people that may at some point be enticed to return. But and we are the quintessential outsiders.
So the next letter in the PLACE model is the A, and A stands for assessing local capacities. And so this is really a critical piece of the PLACE model, because it's about recognizing what you have, what you love, what you miss, and then what are you going to do about it. And one of the things that it was a critical asset on Fogo Island that Shorefast recognized early on and really drew from is the history and the heritage of the place. And so drawing from examples like the Fogo process became really critical to the work of Shorefast. The Fogo process, as you may or may not know, refers to when the Memorials Extension Services partnered with the National Film Board and created a series of films. And those films sparked a dialogue on Fogo Island, and communities came together and discussed how to find a way forward in the face of resettlement. And that history became a critical asset and became inspiration for Shorefast's work on Fogo Island. And so that's an example of leveraging your assets, the unique assets that exist in your particular place, and then having those assets work for you in a productive way.
So the C in place is convey compelling narratives. Narratives or stories are how we make sense of our lives, of our histories, of our towns, of our squabbles with neighbors. We organize everything we understand through stories. Now, some of the stories that are dominant in Newfoundland are not particularly positive. We see in the news all the time. People are, the population is aging, there's a brain drain from communities, things like that. Well, those stories, they're there, but they don't have to be the ones that structure our thinking and structure our actions. And so we believe that the communities that are doing well are the ones who find new stories to tell that counter these sort of dominant narratives with more positive stories. Joni Cranston, who's on our panel tonight, runs the Bon Bay Hospital, and they're in Norris Point. They're getting a new tenant very soon. It's a daycare. Now, a daycare doesn't sound like something that a dying, aging population has a great deal of need for. But in fact, that's not, the aging, the moving out, that's not the only story. So finding the positive stories and stressing those and telling them over and over, that's a big part of what Zita Cobb did on Fogo Island, was tell new stories and tell them again and again and again until they became the dominant narratives of the island.
And finally, the E in the place model refers to engaging in both and thinking. And so there is a tendency, and this is a tendency not just in rural Newfoundland, this is human nature, that we tend to think about the either or. We tend to think about, should we focus on our financial goals if we're a social enterprise, for example, or should we focus on our social goals? And so we have to choose, or we think we have to choose, but in fact, when we frame these challenges more as a both and, that's something that you can take and bring together, like how can we do both? How can we find economic solutions that enhance the social and environmental well-being of a place? When we challenge ourselves to think along those lines, it's not easy to do. Definitely, I don't want to make this sound easy. And the work of community development, by the way, for any of you who are involved in that work, you would know how difficult it is. But the idea is to engage those challenges, engage the both and thinking, stay in those hard conversations. And then out of that can come some very creative solutions. And so I'm just going to pass this over to John to quickly wrap up and talk about how those 5 elements kind of work together in the model, and then we're going to go on to the panel discussion momentarily.
So, as I mentioned, a lot of the community champions that we've talked to have actually been both insiders and outsiders, people that are very familiar with the community, but they came from away, or they were born there, moved away, and came back. What these people are able to do is bridge the knowledge of the traditional with other new perspectives. One of the things that those combined perspectives allows is for them to see new ways of doing things with old things. What do we do with all of these empty buildings? Are they a problem or are they an asset? Those kinds of questions, the ideas that come from the outside perspectives blending with the local perspectives are very useful. And they lead to the creation of new narratives, new stories. And the best stories are the ones that solve the both and problems. Okay, so that's basically, I guess the point is that this is not a step-by-step, do this, then do this, then do this, then do this model. All of these things tend to come together basically all the time. I'm sorry, I'm very inarticulate tonight. What we are hoping and what we plan to do, we've got a workshop session that's being planned for Happy Valley Goose Bay in June. We're looking for other places to take this roadshow. We want to keep the dialogues going. And so if you have ideas or things you'd like to talk about, or if you've got ideas for a social enterprise or a little business that you think may help the community and you want some support for that, the Memorial Center for Social Enterprise is basically here to help you. There's the website. That's their rather busy logo. And I think that we're done here. That's not Fogo Island, by the way. Where is that? Any? Very good.
Time to spare. Yep. No, sit. No, actually, sit over here, because I'm going to ask the panel to come up with John and Natalie now, and we'll have the panel discussion, and then we'll get into the Q&A with the audience. And the panel is making their way up here, and I'll do some introductions. So Sonia Mills is working her way to the middle of the group there, right next to Natalie. Sonia grew up in the town of Clarenville, Newfoundland. She earned a bachelor's degree in kinesiology from Acadia University and law and MBA degrees from Dalhousie University. After several years of illegal practice, Sonia and her wife returned to Newfoundland to start the Port Rexton Brewing Company in 2016. We had a big gathering at my house on Saturday night, and there was a fair bit of Port Rexton present there. Aside from enjoying craft beer, Sonia is a counselor for the town of Port Rexton and a member of the board of directors for the Alpine Development Alliance Corporation, which is the White Hills Ski Resort. Then at this end, closest to me, is Joan Cranston, who is a physiotherapist who has lived and worked in Norris Point since 1988, for many of those years in the old Cottage Hospital. She volunteers as the coordinator for the Bombay Cottage Hospital Heritage Corporation, which has owned and operated the center since 2001. Their mission is the adaptive reuse of the old Cottage Hospital for the preservation of culture and heritage, the promotion of health and wellness, and community economic and social development. Joan strongly believes that community-based research and social enterprise are critical elements in rural vitality and sustainability. Then next to John at the end there is Craig Pollitt, born and raised in Corner Brook. We have quite a nice provincial, no one from Labrador, but not bad on the island. Craig was born in Corner Brook and then raised in Corner Brook and St. John's. Received his Bachelor of Commerce from Memorial University in 1991 and went on to complete his Master's in Developing Economics at Dalhousie in 1996. It was at Dalhousie that he developed a strong interest in local government. His master's thesis research focused on the potential for greater involvement by local government in economic development in Newfoundland and Labrador. And he's been trading on that thesis ever since. Since 2001, Craig has been the CEO of Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador, MNL. Craig plays a leadership role in lobbying and advocacy, membership development and services, as well as policy research and development. And last but not least, next to Joni, is Dr. Doug House, who really needs no introduction for people interested in rural development in Newfoundland and Labrador. Doug's career has spanned academia and public service. He is currently an honorary professor at Memorial University. Doug is the author of 6 books and over 100 articles, reports, and published papers, most having to do with economic and social development. He has held many senior positions in the public service, including chair of the Economic Recovery Commission, where he was my boss, provincial co-chair of the Federal Provincial Task Force on Community Economic Development, and the other co-chair is here, Gordon Slade, and at the time I reported to both of them. You talk about a dangerous combination to have to live up to. Doug has also been Deputy Minister of Economic Development, as well as Chair of the Royal Commission on Employment and Unemployment. So you couldn't have, I think, a greater combination of longstanding experience in studying the issue of rural development in Newfoundland and Labrador, practicing it in several levels of government, and people practicing it in the community. So it's a really lovely mix. Great job, Kathy, and Natalie, in mixing the pot on this one. So I've got a few questions to get us going, and I'll start with Doug and Craig, who we're going to rely on to give us the top-down kind of perspective on understanding rural development from the past and how the place model really informs what they see as our approach to rural development here, past and present. And if you think there's any elements of it that are missing, and Craig, you're poised with the mic. You want to go first?
No, but okay.
You're stuck with it now, boy.
So, what the question actually says is,
His crutch.
what about what about it do I see is different? But I think this will answer your question anyway. There's a lot of the elements that are very familiar to anybody who's done CED right from sort of the 60s in Chicago on to today. A lot of that assessing the community capacity, that sort of thing is all, that a lot of that stuff is tried and tested and tried. But putting it together the way it's put together is really interesting. What I found most interesting, because at M&L we have some background in this, is the emphasis on narrative and telling the story. And it's, to me, my interpretation is it's not just glossing over, right? It's an authentic story about what is actually worthwhile, worth building on, has the potential to grow or develop in a community. And there's a whole bunch of other research that's been done on how you do that and how you understand what connects people to place and that sort of thing. So I was so happy to see that element in there, because if you've ever done strategic planning, and a lot of you have either done it or have had it done to you in the past, everybody will probably know what SWOT means: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Nothing kills a good idea like a SWOT analysis. It boils the life out of what might become a great thing. So I love the idea that here you're really trying to have an honest conversation about what's good, what's happening, you can't ignore what's going wrong or what might not be working as well. But God, tell the good stories as well. And I think that actually feeds growth. It feeds people's imaginations.
Thank you, Craig.
You're
Doug,
welcome.
what do you see about the place model that you see as different from other rural development efforts?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Rob, and Natalie, and John for the opportunity to be here.
Oh, move your mic up there, Doug. Oh,
Is this working now?
oh, you're booming there now.
Okay, thank you. There's all this modern technology and different old folk like me. It's kind of hard to handle. Anyhow, I'm privileged. I feel privileged to be on this panel, representing the older folks maybe. And I see I'm surrounded by people who are a lot younger and a lot smarter than I am, so I'd be careful what I say. But thank you for the opportunity, and it's been great to see a lot of people that I haven't seen for some time, that we worked together over the years, and a lot of this issues that are still very much alive and with us today. In terms of the place model, I think the first thing I'd say is that, and as I guess as Craig alluded to, it's not all that different in some ways from the work that's been going on for many years, but what I really like about it is that it provides a compelling articulation, if you will, of an approach that can mobilize people in support of it. So it gives a kind of focus to the kind of work that people have been trying to do for some time, and as such, I think it would be very useful as an approach. I think it's good to see the explicit attention to linking. I guess that's the second letter in your model. And when I think back on, Rob, what you were saying, and I'm glad to see Gordon Slade here, because one of the things that we did back when the Task Force on Community Economic Development reported was that we established a thing called the Economic Zone Unit. And the whole idea of the Economic Zone Unit was to play a linking role between the different regional development associations at the time, and with government and with business people and with unions and so on. So we had that linking role, and it was a joint initiative of COA and the federal government and Economic Recovery Commission. And so I think when things were closed down later, of all the things that were closed down, that was the saddest, in my opinion, because that had a very important role to play in our approach to community economic development at the time. So I'm glad to see it resurrected, and maybe in a new and more workable form in this model. I also like the new emphasis on the social enterprise approach, which is something that we talked about, we didn't really do much about back in my day. And I'd like to see more elaboration, though, of that role in the place model. You know, you mentioned it, but I think it needs to be fleshed out more, probably. Another thing that I think is really good is good to see people from the Faculty of Business involved in this process. And that's something that we didn't have in years gone by. And it gives, I think, a new legitimacy to community economic development. And it also brings new tools. I mean, it's important in community economic development, community enterprise, that we do adhere to sound business principles. And the message, I think, in social enterprise is that we can do that and yet do it for to support what we're trying to do in communities, not just for people to make profits in private enterprise. So I think that's a very important addition to our working on and thinking about things having to do with community economic development. I'm also glad to see, by the way, I might say as a little aside, that Mark Stoddard is part of your group, and I'm glad to see that sociology is still recognized as being important, wherever Mark is here tonight. So. And finally, I'll say, I think you deserve credit because the place model is pragmatic, is down to earth, is not some high pie in the sky, you know, ivory tower academic thing. It's something that makes sense to anybody, and I congratulate you on that. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Doug. So now we'll go to Joni and Sonia, who are living this issue day in, day out in Norris Point and Port Rexton, Northern Peninsula, Bonavista Peninsula. So how does the place model resonate with your experiences as community champions, social entrepreneurs in rural Newfoundland, Labrador? And Joni, ready to go?
Yeah, and I wish we had a brewery in the old cottage hospital. I'd get class too, right? Do you want to come over? We got a basement, we could set one
And
up.
it all started here.
That's right. The place model really resonates. I've been a physiotherapist for the past 30 years in rural Newfoundland, but I've also been on Development Association, Economic Development Board, and the Rural Secretariat, and the kind of volunteer coordinator of a social enterprise, not-for-profit. So all of the things that they're saying, that is totally my experience in the last 30 years, and it's really nice to hear such smart, well-spoken, like you say too, plain and simple and to the point, to hear these really, really smart people like the Canada Research Chair saying this stuff and so one thing, they're saying it in plain English that anybody can understand. The other thing is, like, I do work a lot with academic researchers and I really respect them, and I think that research and community-based research is part of the answer to our questions. But when I see these academic researchers, they really get us. They get rural, they get what's really good about rural and what keeps us passionate and what keeps us going. So I would really like to work further with people. You know, there's almost no barrier from the start, that we can have this conversation, and the whole point of this is that we make something happen. So I'd much rather work with somebody who gets us and who hopefully knows how to make things happen. The only thing I don't see in the place model, I don't know where the money comes from, and out our way it's always, where's the money? But I'm sure there's incredible world of possibilities.
We can delve into that some more, and maybe Sonia will address some of that, but over to you.
Well, I'm relatively new to the rural development world, and it's I have to say, many aspects of the place model I definitely already see, and it's really awesome to see happening in my area. What particularly resonates with me, I find, is the L in place, the linkage between insiders and outsiders. That's been happening in Port Rexton, and very well. Fortunately, for decades before my wife and I entered the community in 2015, the crazy idea to start this brewery, and having maybe known a couple of people there, and that's it. We entered in with warm welcome arms by everybody in the community. The council was so supportive. Everybody they wanted to help. They wanted to be, they wanted to do what they could to see us succeed. And that ground was already set for us when we came in 2015. And that allowed us to flourish. That allowed us to build and to want to be part of that community as quickly as we could. And now I feel like we're deeply rooted in the community now as a result. And we've only been there, less than 5 years. So that's been probably the most resonating part of the place model for certain. And it has helped other businesses in our area as well. So, yeah.
Super. Thanks, Sonia. So this one I'm going to throw out to all of you, and we'll let Natalie and John re-engage when and as they wish. What is missing from the place model as a tool to help strengthen rural Newfoundland Labrador community development? We've heard Joni speak a bit about how money and its necessity could be articulated some more. Who'd like to go first on this one? I'm looking at John. Give him a chance to reacquire his articulateness.
Is this still on? It is, okay.
There you go.
When Joni asked where does the money come from, I looked at Sonia. Because nothing opens doors and arms and pocketbooks like a good pint of ale. And
Just everybody make beer.
but no, Doug mentioned that he thought that it would make sense to give social enterprise a more prominent place in the model. It's the enterprise part of social enterprise that brings the money. I mean, the advantage of social enterprise is that these are profit-making ventures. The difference between them and a Walmart is that the profit is reinvested in the community, and the purpose for the business is not purely to take money out and build a bigger house or buy a nicer boat. It's to reinvest in the lives of people in the community. And so to give social enterprise a more prominent place and reinvestment of earnings, I think is also something that we could develop more deeply into it.
Thanks, John. Maybe we'll work our way right to left here. Craig, anything you want to highlight there as what's missing from the model? Could be emphasized more?
I wouldn't say it's missing. I think it's a next step, maybe. I'm going to preface this by saying one of the things I like about the model is that it doesn't hitch its wagon to some big institutional mechanism that needs to be set up that'll try to be everything to everyone. It's a very nimble idea. Can be applied almost anywhere, at any scale, in any place. That said, I think there's a really interesting discussion to be had about how you link this model, or folks who are using this model, to the idea of governance, local governance, regional governance, because so much of what a social enterprise needs are effective services, effective infrastructure, all that sort of thing. I know part of the story on Fogo Island was bringing those councils together so that the whole thing could happen. I'm glad to hear you say that the council was really open, and if you're going to do this sort of thing, an open, well-planned, well-functioning local government or regional government is going to help you immensely. So I'd like to see that be sort of phase 2, if I can put it that way, and happy to help with that.
Thanks, Craig. Sonia.
I was kind of, as I was thinking through sort of my answer, I was kind of thinking along the lines of what you were talking about with the, needing the, connecting with the infrastructure and the different offerings, that it's not just about, it's about trying to also tie in, what makes a place thrive in rural Newfoundland, and it's the businesses, it's the services, it's the infrastructure, it's the open arms of a municipal government, it's the support between each other and neighboring communities as well. It's just that working together and having all the pieces of the puzzle, I guess, available to make a place, you want to live there and you want to move there, you want to visit there. And then that really helps, I think, the rural development part of that application of that model, I guess.
I don't know if Natalie will be willing to accept that there's anything missing from the model as the key architect, but based on all the dialogue and so on, what do you think you'd emphasize more or add?
Yeah, I think I would emphasize more what Doug was saying is understanding the role of social enterprise in the model. And one of the things that we talked about at the workshop on Fogo Island was how we take a really broad approach to this notion of social enterprise as more of a mindset. We're not looking to try to define it along legal terms or even engage in academic debates about its definition. What we were really focusing on is social enterprise as a mindset that is using enterprise or business tools to further social goals. And so that's why we consider someone like Sonia and Alicia, who own the Port Rexton Brewery, as social entrepreneurs because they have that social enterprise mindset. They are a for-profit, but you can be a for-profit and that is that is operating and helping a community. And if you are involved in community, if you're a community enterprise or a social enterprise and you exist in a community, you likely wear many hats. So this is what Sonia was referring to, is that you may end up being on council, sitting on different boards, running an enterprise or a social enterprise, volunteering in your community, and all of those pieces kind of come together. And so we don't, it's important to not think about this just as one organization in a community, but rather a collective of individuals and organizations working together to further the goals of the community.
Great. Doug. John may be turning it on and off for us, so you may just need to
Is
speak.
this working now? Yes.
There you go.
Okay, great, thanks. I'll just make 3 quick points here. I think one is that there's very little mention of the key issue of the mobilization of investment capital in the model the way it is now, anyhow. Although I know that you recognize the importance of it, but we think in the Fogo example, in the early stages, the fisheries cooperative, the cooperative model for in getting capital, to start up your enterprise was important. And what some people have called philanthropic development as being very important in the rise of Shorefast. And so I think you are going to be challenged with the issue. How far can we generalize from that particular case to other situations where it may be more of a challenge to mobilize capital in support of what you're trying to do? And I've had some experience with the Change Island example about maybe a decade ago. And the intention there was quite similar, but they didn't have that nice source of capital to turn to, and it was more difficult to try to bring about change. Although they were successful to a significant degree. So I think that's just, I don't mean that it's a negative, I just think it's something that needs to be more explicitly addressed in the model. And I think also, to be honest, you have to identify what the barriers and the obstacles might be that have to be addressed, as well as opportunities. What are they? How can they be addressed and overcome as an important issue? Some cases you get inappropriate regulations that were made for a city, applying it to a small rural community doesn't work. And how can we address that and get around it and so on? So that would be my second issue there. And then the third one is not really a shortcoming, but just a challenge, and that's how do you coordinate, and I think Craig made some reference to this, how do you coordinate this kind of an approach with wider regional and provincial initiatives and with government policies, and what role should the federal and provincial government be playing if you can get this model really going for people? So those would be my 3 points.
Thanks, Doug. A few big ones there. Joni, we've heard money you raised. More on that, or any other ones you'd raise?
A couple, I guess I get 3 quick ones too, don't I?
Well,
first,
Doug did, so you can.
And I'll be quick, I can talk fast. So the first thing is actually.
No rush.
After hearing these, I'm glad I got to be last, I guess. Because after hearing the answers to the question, I personally don't think there's anything missing from the place model. I think it's an incredible tool to move us forward, to provide real answers to some of the wicked questions that face us. I think the C in the place model also stands for the fact that this model can be a catalyst to make real sustainable community rural development happen. So thank you. And so what do we need to make it happen? Well, we need money, of course. And the point I'd like to make about money is that I don't need $1 million. I don't need 14 billion. Give me 50,000. And I want a string attached. I want you to study and watch what I do with that 50,000. And I want you to see your return on investment in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years. I want you to watch me, right? I'm not asking for much. And we have the expertise here in the room to kind of study that and answer that. So if I was trying to make something happen and I got 6 ideas in my head, I could launch either one tomorrow. I've got like a Canada research chair who tells me money isn't a problem. I've got somebody I've got somebody who knows how to govern municipalities and probably get people working together. That is so important. That's a layer. That's important. That's the linkages layer. I got somebody who knows how to make beer. That's the answer to so much, like revenue generation, money, sure, right? And also how it draws people together. That is such a linkage, right? And I've got Natalie, who's the brilliant, one of the brilliant creators of this model. And the reason it's so brilliant is because I know that she talked to a lot of people and she brings a lot of voices into the model. So it's not her model, it's a collective community model. And then we've got like incredible wealth of experience, a former deputy minister and a chair of an economic recovery commission. Like, come on, seriously, if this group of people can't make it happen, like who can? Really, that's a question. That's your next question. And what do I have? I have an old cottage hospital. We've got a place to stay. We have a museum. We have a creative studio space. We're getting a daycare. We got a public library. We got physio, massage, and chiro, and health services, and everything you want, and gardens, and greenhouses. And this is actually true. We have all this. And we have a community radio station so you can get your message out, and there's radio bingo. Revenue generation, get them drinking beer and playing radio bingo. We're good to go, hey? So if we can't make this happen now, Rob, when can we make it happen?
Beautiful. And so the P in place stands for promote community champions, but key part of that clearly is passion. And Joni captures a lot of what many community champions and folks around the province have. So really a lot of this, and we had a lot of chat before the session, we talked a little bit about the C is about conveying compelling narratives. In this whole business of narrative, the stories we tell and the things we focus on. And you think about the province these days, and for the last little while, it's been kind of a funk after the high times we had there while we partied for 7 or 8 years. But there are good things happening all over the place. And so I'd like to ask all the panel again, maybe we start with Natalie, who, again, shaping the model. What are the kinds of things that you think can change that narrative? What are some of the positive things happening in rural Newfoundland and Labrador that we can build on?
Sonia and Joni. That's my answer.
So there are 2 great examples in a couple of locations, couple of regions. Are there a couple of things you'd say about what they're doing that you could see relating to other places around the province? How would you spread that passion, that insight, that activity?
I think it's out there. It's just that we're not hearing about it. I didn't know Joni until we went to Norris Point in January, so I didn't know there was all this exciting stuff happening in Norris Point. And it's not just Joni. We met other community champions from the region, and we heard their stories and what they're working on, and it's really inspiring. And I go to the Bonavista Peninsula every year, and I see what's happening there, and it's truly inspiring. And I've been to the Port Rexton Brewery, and I've had their beer. And so that's a better known example. The Bonavista Peninsula is better known, and Fogo Island is better known, but there are so many places around this province where there are things happening, and we're just not hearing about them. And so we just need to get the word out there. We need to share those stories.
Craig, no one travels around this province, I suspect, more than you. It can be specific examples you think of, or how do you think we change the narrative?
I don't know if I have specific examples. I see a lot of the Sonia story happening, right? So younger people, comparative to who's normally involved in CED, who are not really doing, I can't speak for you, but I would imagine you don't consider yourself necessarily working on CED. You're running a brewery that happens to have some social impact and community impact and that sort of thing. So what I see are younger people starting these kinds of businesses or trying to find solutions to challenges in their communities outside their traditional mechanisms that we use to solve community problems or that we use to build on community opportunities or community capacities. And that's the other thing I find exciting about this model, is that it is institution-free to some degree. And a lot of what I've seen from the municipal sector, for example, which I've been working with for almost 20 years, I see a lot of younger people who are very passionate about issues, multiple issues, not so passionate about the old aging institutions that we use to try to manage those issues. And I think social enterprise and the approach that this team is talking about offers a lot of hope for people who want to run this kind of business. It doesn't have to be a brewery. There could be people passionate about geotourism or heritage or whatever. I think this model offers a nice little gateway for people into that world who want to run a business but want to make their community a better place than when they started the business. So that's what I see. I see a lot of that stuff starting to happen around the province, despite the fact that, I mean, at MNL we talk all the time about the demographic challenges that we're facing. But a lot of the cool stuff that's starting to happen is happening because new eyes and new minds and younger folks are taking on these challenges. They're just not doing it through the traditional mechanism. So this, I think, is a great opportunity. And I'll go right back to my second point. It would be cool down the road to talk about how we link it to the traditional mechanisms, not to suck it into that vortex, but to see if we can't reinvigorate the traditional mechanisms with new ways of thinking.
So Sonia, Craig didn't want to speak for you, but he referenced you. What would you say based on what he said, or you'd want to add on this?
Well, firstly, thank you for referencing me as the younger. I just had my 40th birthday today, so no, thank you. I will build on what you said about seeing a lot more younger people kind of getting into entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, things like that. We saw that, I can kind of still only speak from my experiences, especially in our area, but we've seen a lot of young business operators and owners in our area that, like a disproportionately, in a positive way, high number. And we've actually kind of banded together and tried to also, I guess the building part is not just young people getting into, putting their ideas out there and making these great steps, but also working together, businesses working together, and that's not, that you could be any age for that, of course, but just the idea of, a rising tide floats all boats, just that you help your other businesses out. There's not, it's much better not to look at each other as competitors, but instead to look at each other as collaborators. And that has been successful, not just in our area, but also in the craft beer industry. And but definitely in our area. We had a little group that got together actually of different operators, and we tried to figure out some solutions to problems that we're all facing, and we didn't realize we were all facing pretty similar problems, like how do we get shipments of, goods from St. John's into Port Rexton? Like everyone's doing it on their own in their own cars, and how can we work together? Oh, the brewery has a van. But that kind of idea of like how we can work together and help each other out. So I think that that's got that social kind of feel to it that fits, I think, right with that place model.
I'm saving John for last. You just stay put. Doug, you spent a lot of years looking at ways to change the narrative and the integrated approach that you put into policy in a lot of ways was related to all this. Do you see new ways to change the narrative or build on this?
Well, I think that the first thing I'd mention is the emergence of some really strong community-based initiatives in recent years. Unlike you, I've been going back and forth through Trinity and Port Rexton and Bonavista for about 70 years, believe it or not. And when I first went there, the fishing industry was thriving. There were great merchant centers. It was a great place to go. You know, it was a really lively rural place. And unfortunately, then I saw it decline. And, you know, about 20, 25, 30 years ago, it was a poor place. And people were leaving, and houses weren't in very good shape, and people were sad, you know. And then it all has changed around dramatically over the past 20 years. And I'd like to give some credit here. You mentioned Rising Tide. I'm put a capital R in Rising Tide because Rising Tide Theatre that first started the Trinity pageant and the theatre in Trinity was sort of the beginning of this process. And I think in other parts of the province too, theatre and culture is part of what we should be thinking about. The contribution that developing local theatre and other kinds of music and culture can play in economic development, community economic development, is very important. In a different way, I think if you're thinking of positive things, I may say so, Rob, I think that the Harris Centre is a very positive contributor to rural development in the province. And it's kind of kept things going over the years, and it still plays a very important role and can be even stronger in the years ahead. The only criticism I have of the Harris Centre is that the powers that be decided to make Rob Greenwood the executive director of a thing called, what's it called?
Oh, public engagement.
Oh, public engagement, right, which is sort of, I'd like to see him just be head of the Harris Centre and keep making that work. But you can tell your president that.
He just heard it.
And then more recently, I think this whole PACE model movement is very important, and that's a real contributor. And the Center for Social Enterprise. So those are positive things, I think, as well. So, and finally, to give a little bone over to Craig there, I think the strengthening of municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, is a very important part of the process. And I'd like to see that develop further and become a real force for rural development in the province.
It was the last recommendation of the Royal Commission on Employment and Unemployment.
They'll catch up to us yet.
Yep. Joni, your passion is clear. The stuff you're making happen in Norris Point is clear. How do we build on that to change the narrative more broadly for rural Newfoundland and Labrador?
I think, do we have to change where the narrative is coming from? Like, I don't know. You hear all this doom and gloom, like that whole statistic that came out about more people dying than are being born. But hey, how come we got a daycare? And how come, like, as a physiotherapist, I get connected to all walks of life, carpenters, plumbers, electricians, new moms, old people, people who work away, people who live here, teachers, doctors, university you know, so you get the whole meal deal. And you hear all these stories. Like, did you know there's a lot of kids in Springdale? They got like lots of kids in grade 1 and 2 and 3. I didn't know that. Peterview Botwood has a lot of kids and a whole bunch of stuff going on for kids. There's all these little pockets and all these little places that you don't know about unless you actually get outside St. John's and hear the story. And I wonder, what is the point of all the doom and gloom anyway? You wouldn't get out of bed if it's all doom and gloom, so you might as well tell something positive. And where I live, we don't talk about doom and gloom. It's story and it's stormy and it's been a hard winter, but we don't talk about doom and gloom. We talk about the things we're doing and the positive things that are happening. And I know that happens in a lot of other places. So I don't know, that is a big question. How do you get that out, and how do you make that be the story that is being told? Because if it's all doom and gloom, who wants to come here? Who wants to stay here? Who wants to live here? Nobody. But actually we do. I'm sure you see in municipalities, and I know a lot of young people, they do want to live in rural Newfoundland. Last summer, we had a bunch of young people from Ontario who wanted to come and move here. They stayed at the hostel, and someone wanted to open a blacksmith shop, and somebody wanted to write a book, and because you can do that from anywhere, like, there's a lot of people that want to come to rural Newfoundland and small towns in Newfoundland, and even some people want to come to St. John's. Right? So there must be something good here, and we just have to start telling ourselves, as Zita Cobb said, say it over and over and over again, and after a while you can make it true. That's what we made the cottage hospital happen. We just kept saying it over and over and over again.
Right on. So John, last word on this one.
I've been impressed and inspired by the numbers and the different types of champions that we've encountered around Newfoundland. And each one of them is doing something that they care deeply about. But I think the answer for the province lies in the cumulative effect of all of these smaller efforts. And the champions aren't all going to be social entrepreneurs. We may find champions within municipal government who are willing to step forward and say, well, where are we creating barriers for people like Leo Hearn and Kimberly Oren and Fishing for Success? How are we getting in the way of their accomplishing their social mission, which they're doing with a shoestring budget and hearts as big as Newfoundland? And so they may be, and some of the champions come from academia. Natalie Slawinski here is a champion of social enterprise, of people doing things that are bettering their communities. And together, cumulatively, we can solve these problems. The other thing that I would mention, and this goes back to Joni's request for $50,000. I wish I had it to give you. But another thing that we see is that even small successes breed interest and breed larger successes. So if you buy a cottage hospital for $1 and start renting out rooms to backpackers and reinvesting that money to improve the kitchen and make a place for radio station, those are successes that attract attention, and they make the whole community more attractive. And if the community is more attractive, it attracts young people who want to start a mountain biking business or something else. And so these successes grow and feed each other. I think that it is our task to try to pitch in and see how we can link together and help each other's businesses and ventures and careers and everything else.
Great. So I have a few other questions, but we have a room full of people who have loads of expertise and interest in this, as well as on the web. So I'm going to have one last kind of combined question for Natalie and John, just to clue up this section. And I'm combining a couple. One is, when you talk about place, because I know we had some discussion on this, and I'm sure there's some in the room, are you talking specifically about a particular community dot on the map, or do you think this can apply to a region more broadly? And then, while answering that, or as answering that, what's next for the research? Natalie's ready to go.
Okay. So for your first question, I think we think that the place model probably could apply at different scales. It could apply at the community level, at a regional level, at a provincial level, but we would have to kind of, think about that, have conversations with people, sort of test that before we can say for sure whether it applies. But we're really interested in extending the model and seeing what the boundary conditions of the model are. And so just trying to understand how the model can help in those different contexts, and maybe it needs to be tweaked or thought through differently or expanded on. But so far, in conversations we've had with people who operate at different scales, it seems to resonate with them. And so that's the first thing. And then for your second question, we're looking now to extend our research beyond Fogo Island. So we've started doing a research project in Petty Harbor on Fishing for Success. So this is a social enterprise, as John was mentioning, that operates on a shoestring budget. And so we're going to see if the place model holds there, and we're going to do an in-depth study of that place. And we're looking to partner with Joni and start doing some research in Norris Point as well. And so we're looking to expand out and do a multi-case study project across the province to see what is similar and or different in various places that are engaging in some sort of social enterprise activity.
Great. John, anything you want to add before we? All right. I think I'll go back to the podium so I can see the room. Am I allowed to do that, Kathy? Oh, great. So we have questions already emailed in, and we have lots of people in the room. And we will get a mic to you in the room. If you put up your hand, I'll keep track of the hands as they go up and direct traffic as we go. And you can introduce yourself and keep your question or comment succinct so that we can get lots of interaction. That's where the real learning is. And if you're viewing online, you can email questions in, as some of you have done already, to Kathy Newhook at kathyn@mun.ca. And so we'll start with the gentleman in the room who has the black shirt right on the aisle there, Justin. And then we'll come back to Kathy, and then I'll keep track of a couple more hands here. Yes, sir.
Hi, so my name is Patrick Butler. I'm a journalist with Radio Canada here in St. John's. My question, I think one of the, we kind of alluded to it a bunch during the discussion, but for me, one of the sort of the lingering questions for a lot of people when they think about this and they're not intimately involved in it like you all are is, you know, the money aspect of this and where does the money come from? And I wonder if I could hear from Joni, and I'm sorry, I Port Wexton Brewery.
Sonia,
sorry. If you could talk about your sort of where the money came from in the beginning for you and the lessons you learned from that process, and maybe how building on your experience, how you think that, you know, funding opportunities for other sorts of things like what you go through could apply. I don't know if my question makes sense really, but just when we're talking about money for these new initiatives, where that should come from and the lessons you've learned from that process.
okay.
Is this on? Okay, yeah. So with our own experience, we did the sort of, we put together a business plan, and we went to the government and asked, can somebody loan us some money, please? So we did we applied at the both provincial level and the federal level with ACOA, two very great sources for funding for startups in rural Newfoundland. And I think our success with, I guess, getting that money was, a lot of it was probably timing, actually. We came in right at the cusp of when craft beer was taking off in Newfoundland. And so I think that coupled with, hey, look, we're going to try this in outside of, I guess, the Avalon as well. And they liked that. So I guess that's kind of how we were able to get going. And of course, you have to have some of your own money as well. So we kind of sold everything we had and moved over, threw everything on the line and said, we're going to go for it. And then, of course, then there's all the support that comes around that from the community, from your friends and family and everything. And that's, I guess, our story. I don't know,
Joni, you want to weigh in on this?
We started with $1. We got an old hospital for $1. We actually sent them $1 and they sent it back. They said, we didn't really mean you had to give it. So then we had an empty building for a few years, and then we had somebody help us to establish ourselves as a corporation, and then JCP projects, God loved them, it used to be federal government, now it's provincial. We've had that many JCP projects that my daughter used to think it stood for Joni Cranston Project. It actually starts for Job Creation Partnerships, and that was a wonderful program. It brought us labor that, they lovingly restored the building and some money for materials, and now I use it for community development assistant, heritage development assistant, a whole bunch of, it's a pretty good program, and there is lots of grants out there. We've had the province, the department that keeps changing its name, that one, we've had that in all its versions, and ACOA, which hasn't changed its name in a long time, so that's good. Everybody knows what ACOA is. So we have had money like that and these grants and projects, except the thing is you always have to jump through a hoop to make sure you fit into what they want. First they'd only fund buildings, then they'd only fund humans, and then they'd only fund projects, so nothing's sustained. So what I would really like to see, the next answer is the Social Enterprise Innovation Fund that just gives you some money with as few strings as possible attached, except that maybe there's probably a mechanism where you can bring some community partners or social entrepreneurs in to help make that it's not somebody giving you something that the community is also invested, whether it's their human resource or their in-kind or some money that they have in the sock in the drawer, so that it becomes more of a partnership, and then we use that money to grow it. Again, studying it all the time to see what the real return on investment is. And if Newfoundland can do that, we could do that, because right now there's not too much in place. So if you could start something like that, you'd be world leaders. Blow them out of the water. You would, right?
Thank you, Joni. We don't need everybody on the panel to answer every question, but if someone has a burning desire to jump in on this one, you good? Okay, we got the mic over with Kathy. I've written down a bunch of hands. I'm going to get a few done over in this corner, then I'm going to go there, then I'm going to go there, then I'll come back. Kathy, what's emailed in? First one.
All right. Nancy Brace emailed in a couple of comments. First, she said, wanted to comment that while tourism is a great thing and helping many communities grow and thrive, we have to be very careful not to cross the line of honoring and telling our stories and step into the part of perpetuating stereotypes, and not being authentic to fit the brand that is being sold to the tourists. She followed that up as well to say that Natalie had spoke about, she made a great point that needs to be addressed. She said that that she had no idea of all the exciting things that were happening in Norris Point. And the point is, the media and the government promotional tools are not promoting everything out there. And in the case of the media, they do not have to promote positive, but they don't always have to promote negative either. So people then are believing what they're hearing, and it's not always really what's happening. She then followed up again. She's clearly engaged in this with a question.
I'm going to ask her and you to be succinct on this now.
Okay. She had a lot to say. She also said, while Municipalities NL plays a great role, there are many of who are in the local service districts who are self-sufficient and who are being sidelined as a way to starve the communities into submission to accept regionalization government. This then flies in the face of the place model, because the stories are the stories of a community and not a whole region, which, while communities may not have much in common, they also have many differences that go a long way back. Communities need to collaborate regionally, but they should not be pushed into amalgamation.
So we could spend zero time on those questions. They're minor. Keep the mic there, Justin and Kathy, because we'll hit a couple of the gentlemen here, then we'll go over to the middle. Who would like to weigh in? And I'll ask the panelists to be succinct also. Any of those nuggets that anyone wants to respond to?
Oddly enough, I'm going to talk about the tourism thing first. Because I think she's absolutely right in that the compelling narrative part of this, my interpretation anyway, is that it's an authentic narrative. It's something that's real. It's not just the gloss, it's not just the cute story or whatever. And it's a big part of this term placemaking, this idea of what attaches people to their place and why they stay and why they invest and that sort of thing. It's not because they bought or saw a brochure and they liked it. It's because there's something real about that place that touches them and makes them want to stay. On the last bit, I wish I had the authority to do that sort of stuff, but I don't. I think there's a really interesting, powerful, necessary discussion that has to happen about how we govern ourselves. And with the dispersion of communities, with the population that we have, there's a discussion that has to happen about how we make sure the right kinds of services get to folks who require them. And as I said earlier, amalgamation definitely is not the route. I'll say that. That's on the back of my business card. no forced amalgamations. But I really do think that there's something in the place model that can inform a new way for those conversations to happen, because typically they happen in a really formulaic, almost oppressive way in this province. So I think there's something there that other sectors can take and use.
Anyone else on the panel really want to jump in on this one? We have a whack of questions, but good. Okay, gentleman at the front, you can introduce yourself and be succinct.
Hi, my name is John Michael Lennon. I'm with the Crossroads HSSE. Worked on a lot of issues for about 30 years now, sectoral issues, looking at problems and solutions, but we're faced with a big one that we're not talking about these days. And the International Panel on Climate Change has always been one that has aimed low. It's a consensus panel. And we're getting hit now with a climate crisis. And when we look at the models, as some of us have been doing for decades, the last bit of ice is going to go from St. Anthony to Bonavista. And it's going to be one of the last livable places. We're going to run out of areas to grow food very soon. El Niños every 2 years and every 6. So rice crops are failing. 800 million people are hungry in the world. Hate to be a bearer of bad news. Some of the best work we've done has been in the fossil fuel industry, but it's not if, it's when we get off of that. And we're going to have an influx. We're going to have a massive influx of people coming here to survive. Because even if we do everything in deep adaptation mitigation available today, we're still going to hit 3 degrees by 2100. So short of carbon sequestration amping up 1 million times of what it is right now, we need to look at, yes, saving what we got, but sea level rise is not 10 meters, it's 30 meters. And we need to start looking at our roads, our infrastructure, the 250,000 acres lying in fallow. And we went
Wrap it up now.
Yeah, so
Really good.
where is that? Where is that in the narrative? Where's that in the discussion? I went to the offshore industries. I was talking to Rob about this, talked to everybody. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Nobody's got a mitigation plan. Nobody's got a plan B. We're not, because we have the most to lose in the Western world. So we really need to focus on that, because 12 years is not 12 years, it's 6 years.
Let's hear that. Great. Thank you, John. We'll see who on the panel, and Kathy, Justin can give the mic to Jerry for the next one. Then we'll come back to Kathy. Then we're going to go over to the center. Who would like to weigh in on that one? John.
I will, and it's something I do with trepidation, because I don't disagree with anything you said. The reason that Natalie started the work with her team on Fogo Island was because the mission of Shorefast was building resilience, and that remains their mission. And it is the focus of our place-based research. We are interested in understanding how communities can become more resilient, not just more prosperous, but able to face shocks of various kinds. And so it is very much in our minds. And beyond that, I'm not sure what I can say, but communities that learn to work together, to respect the environment, to prepare for the kinds of changes that will inevitably come, if not to our generation, then probably the next one. Maybe. Yeah, you know. Yeah, I read the deep adaptation article too, and it scared the bejesus out of me. It left me kind of nearly comatose for about 2 or 3 days. It's terrifying. But what can we do other than try to figure out how to be more resilient as people and communities, and assess and utilize the capacities that we have to try to restore our ecosystems the best we can in this time that we have to do that.
One suggestion, Paul Hawkins, draw down.
Mm.
one copy left at Chapters, but you can get it online. It talks about what we can do.
Yeah, Paul Hawkins written some really good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, John and John. Anyone else on the panel want to weigh in quickly on this one? I see Joni.
I just got, if the bad times come, I'd rather be in rural Newfoundland. We got sheds, generators, wood stoves, gardens, cellars full, moose meat. We got it all, right? And I mean, in a storm, you want to be with the person from out around the bay, right?
Did I see another person want to weigh in on this one?
I
Doug.
just have a quick comment. I think that since Confederation and long before that, our focus in development in the province has always been resource development, economic development, and then any kinds of issues about what's the environmental impact or the social impact is always a secondary consideration. And that has to be reversed, and it should happen right away. And unfortunately, I can't really see right now that any of our major political parties are taking that alternative approach, but they should.
Thank you, Doug. Jerry has the mic, and then we'll go back to Kathy. Then we're going over there.
Jerry Dick with Heritage NL.
All right, just try again.
You got it now? Okay. Jerry Dick with Heritage NL. One of the things we do is we work with communities to identify cultural assets and then to have a conversation about how they can be preserved, safeguarded, and how they can become a tool for community development. One of the things that I don't think it's missing from the place model, but I think it's buried in there somewhere, and that's the planning work. And Craig, pointed out that planning is kind of a dirty word in a lot of places. A couple of years ago, we took some representatives from a community in the province to Bonavista to see what were some of the best practices there. And two of the things that emerged were leadership champions, and the other was a long-term plan. We were barely back on the bus when we heard the comment, well, we can see doing that down the road, but we just want to do some stuff. So my question is to anybody on the panel, do you have any thoughts in terms of how we can approach planning in a fresh manner that is meaningful and communities actually want to undertake?
Thank you. Who'd like to go on that one? Sure.
I'm not sure if Jerry lobbed this one out there for me or not, but we're actually working with Heritage Newfoundland and Labrador and a bunch of other organizations on a way to engage municipalities in planning. And I hesitate to say this out loud because they're all listening, or a bunch of them are listening, a way for them to engage in planning without actually knowing that they're doing planning. And one of the challenges, I did say SWOT analysis kills good ideas, but really bad planning kills good ideas. Planning done well, planning done creatively is absolutely essential. What's the, is it Eisenhower quote? Plans are meaningless, planning is essential. That's kind of the way I look at the world. And about half of the municipalities in the province have a community plan. The other half do not, which has a whole bunch of implications for regulations and boring stuff like that, but it has even bigger implications if somebody with a cool new idea comes to town and you don't have a way for them to plug in. So I like to think that if we can engage municipalities or any community leaders on achieving a goal, which is again what I like with the place model, focus them on that goal, give them the planning tools. They'll use the planning tools because they want to achieve the goal, not because they want to do planning. And I think that's incredibly important, that we don't think of it as a big overarching thing that's got to be done. It's just part of what you need to do. You guys are doing planning all the time, but it's just part of the business, right?
Well, actually, I just, if I might be able to jump in for a second, from a town point of view, we just underwent the process of going through a strategic plan, or we worked with a consulting firm, and we actually just received it a couple of weeks ago, so we now have a strategic plan along with our town plan. And just that process, like you mentioned, it's the planning, it's not necessarily the plan. Yeah. Just going through that process really you know, we had council involved. We had a committee outside of council. We engaged the community. Everybody was pretty well part of this and gave their input, and we learned so much about our community from that process. And we're talking about our assets. What do we have to offer? What is our narrative? What is all this as a community? And it was a really cool process. And with the, you know, who knows where the plan can go from here kind of thing.
Thank you there. Kathy, another one emailed in?
I'm going to squeeze in two.
Okay.
Only because one's a comment, and I don't want it to go unheard. This came in from Conrad Collier. He's watching out in Grand Bank, and he echoes a lot of the comments in the room this evening. He said, I've found that one of the biggest challenges in rural development is changing the defeatist mindset, stimulating optimism and enthusiasm. Once these juices get going, the others, as you describe in place, follow. And then the question I have is actually from Kathy Stacy, and it's for Craig, so you're up again. As we know, supportive municipalities are important to community development. How do we educate rural municipalities and councils in understanding, supporting, and embracing the place model of community development? And how do we begin that process? And what is the approach?
Oh my. What is the approach?
And Justin, we're going to go to the gentleman with the blue shirt at the back of the room next, in the middle.
The short, simple answer is over and over and over and over and over again. People running communities in this province have 1,000 things coming at them every week. Multiple fires to put out all the time, especially if you're running the fire department. So getting it in front of those folks on a regular basis is a key thing. I tell my staff, we have events all year long, every year, and I'm always telling my staff, the day you're getting in front of 300 or 400 municipal leaders and you can't possibly stomach the idea of telling them this thing one more time, that's the day that somebody in the audience is going to go, oh, I know what you're talking about. You want us to do this. Because they've just got so much going on. So working, our organization can do a lot. We can get the message out. We can have all kinds of events where people like Natalie and John are in front of them, talking to them. I think really we need to look at going back to, and I don't want to say extension services, but we need to go back to the idea that it's good to have folks in a region that can sit down with a council or a group of councils and walk them through this stuff, because it's not immediately apparent how you use it. And I'll go back to my first point, or my last point, that, to put it bluntly, there's got to be something in it for them. They've got to see that if we follow this path, the likelihood of achieving something is quite high. If we don't go down this path, the likelihood of not achieving something is quite high. And people get on people run for council, get on council to fix things or to improve things. They don't get on council to be on council. They don't get on council to read minutes and debate issues and all that kind of stuff. They get on council to achieve things. So we need to show it to them in a way where they understand there's an achievement potential here, I think.
Thank you, Craig. So, gentleman with the blue shirt there, waiting patiently. After him, we're going to go over to Patty on the far left, and the gentleman with the toque behind him, and then the lady behind him. And then I have one hand over here, so if I haven't got you in that list, put up your hand. And I got you against the wall there. Okay, floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Rob. I guess my question is sort of similar to the last one. I'd like to hear from anybody other than Craig.
Here.
So my name is Brian Peach. I'm the CAO of the town of Pooch Cove. And I guess I'm a community champion, or I like to think of myself as one. Anyone who talks to me, I'm quite energetic, quite innovative, willing to help somebody pursue some idea to better their town. Right now, my economic development strategy is if I see an entrepreneur walk in my office, I'm not going to let them leave until they're going to go do something. I haven't had them come in my office yet, so that's just sort of my current plan. I guess the next step is how do I create entrepreneurs who will then come into my office? But I don't know. I need to figure that one out. But my main question, I guess, is as us, if you are a town manager or you are a municipal councillor or you're very well connected with your council and you know the community councillor who's very pro development, entrepreneurship, new things, I guess what would be the one thing that you think the town needs to do, or what would that person need to do to make something happen? From you guys, the panelists, individually, what do you think a town champion could do to help make some of these things happen?
Thank you. Anybody? Craig? But Craig. Joni? Sonia? Sounds like a community level question.
I've got lots of ideas for my community. I don't know. I know where to look in the unlikely places for your community champion. The person might not know they're an entrepreneur or a champion, or they might not. So maybe you got to go out looking, go to the coffee shop, go to your physiotherapist, go to whatever, go to the gym, go play bingo. I don't know, maybe you need to go out and look for them, because there are people there with ideas, but there isn't a very clear path. So that's hopefully something that a model like this could maybe create something that you could drive out along. Or I have another idea. The other idea, because how do you learn from the past to feed into the future? At one time, a long, long time ago, there was a thing called Mon Extension that put people from the university out in communities, and they actually did a lot of community building. So there's a lot of brilliant people in Mon. Maybe if you'd probably have to call it something different, but you know, if you could put really smart people from the university, and maybe not just one, but like a couple of them, so they can work better together, put them out in the community and see what happens. Maybe give them $50,000.
Sonia on this one, or anyone else? And Justin, we're going to go to Patty over by the window next. Natalie.
Okay. So you want to make your town more entrepreneurial, or you want to attract more entrepreneurs. I think it comes down to thinking about what kinds of I think it's about creating energy in a place. I think it's about building something that gets people excited and wanting to start new things. I think it's about creating creative energy. So how do you do that? Do you start with supporting a community center that does really innovative things? Is it about going out to your local high school and engaging with young people and getting them excited about being creative and energized and doing entrepreneurial things in the community? I don't know. I just think it has to start with engaging, capturing people's imagination, capturing their entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, we're lucky at Memorial because we're surrounded by young, energetic people. We work at a business school. We have Enactus Memorial, which is a group of students who are engaging in entrepreneurial ventures in support of social and environmental causes. And so I think it's a question of maybe engaging with your youth and really tapping into that energy and that entrepreneurial spirit that tends to happen in youth, but can also happen at all ages. It's just an idea that came to my mind.
Thanks, Natalie. Sonia wants, and then we're going to go to Patty, then the gentleman with the toque, and then the lady behind him.
I'd like to build on what you said too about the youth and that energy. One thing that we have in Port Rexton sometimes is we don't have a lot of real estate that's available for people to go and start businesses, or even to move there. It's tied up. It's all rural Newfoundland issues that we all face. But trying to figure out a way to create a space where you could put people into almost like an incubation type of environment. I don't know if that's have the school do a youth market, or have, do these initiatives, maybe bring in businesses from other places to come and do pop-ups in this space to give people that exposure and create that sort of leadership or role model kind of feeling, and then see if somebody might be like, oh, I might want to do this in this community, and build on that, and then it just snowballs from there.
Thank you. Waiting very patiently. Introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Patty Barry, and I'm a photographer. I'm one of those outsiders who moved to rural Newfoundland, and I have no regrets. I'd recommend it to anyone here. In the past 8 years, I spent 6 years working for the Shorefast Foundation and the Fogo Island Inn, and a summer fall season working for the Fogo Island Fisheries Co-op, and a summer in Bonavista with a photo gallery. And each year, each summer, we've seen an increase in visitors and businesses. And each fall and winter, we see business drop off a cliff, and you know, there's nothing happening comparatively in the wintertime. So my question is, how do we broaden the shoulders of the shoulder season in these places? Because when people are trying to decide whether they're going to take a leap into business, it's, you know, it's not enough to be profitable for 4 months of the year when you have to pay a business loan for 12 months of the year. One of the tools that the Shorefast Foundation used was a business assistance fund, which offers low, easy term interest rates, but still people are fearful. You know, so how do we broaden those seasons? And the other thing, which goes back to the genesis of the Shorefast Foundation, is how do we keep the young people in rural Newfoundland? The average age of people in the fishery is like 55, 60 years old on Fogo Island. So how do we solve those problems? Any ideas?
Thank you, Patty. Great, important questions. I see Natalie chomping and Sonia, not
I'm
Craig.
fighting over the mic.
Sonia.
So we've seen a bunch of fun things start up in our area on the shoulder seasons, and I think the big thing that has been a driver for that success has been making it event-based and getting all your different businesses together as part of these events. So in addition to that, we tried keeping the brewery tap room open every weekend in the winter this year as just kind of like a pilot. Let's see if anyone comes out. And of course, we had you know, awesome support from locals, but we were able to also bring visitors to our area. We found that whenever we had events, that's what brought people out. So we started just trying to load our months with, you know, an open mic night or a trivia night or a 120s night or something. There had to be something else than just in the summer and August, you could just open your doors and there's like thousands of people around in your area if it's like a tourist destination anyway. But yeah, the events, and I mean, there's a big trail running event now in November, which is kind of a, which has extended everybody's season in our area. Everyone typically closed by Thanksgiving, and now we're open till the first week in November. And people magically come in between there, which we never thought would happen. But anyway, that's just kind of my experience.
Thank you. Natalie on that one.
Yeah, so a few months ago, I got a call from a community champion in Carbonear named Florence Button. And Florence Button invited me and my students to come to Carbonear to see what's happening there. And so we went on a field trip, and when we got to Carbonear, we went to a store that had started off, I believe, as a coffee shop, but then they realized it was hard to make a coffee shop work in the winter because it was attracting mostly tourists in the summer. And so then they added on some different pieces to their shop. So there was an art studio, an art school, a tourist shop, and I think a yoga studio. And so what these entrepreneurs did is two women who partnered together and created basically all of these businesses that would, some of these businesses are more successful in the fall, winter, spring. Others are more successful in the summer. In other words, they diversified, but within this one complex, and they became very creative at using the spaces that they had in ways that could attract different segments of the market, different community members at different times. And I like the idea that Sonia had around events, because these folks in Carbonear, that's the kind of thing they were doing. They were organizing events to draw the community in. The day that we went, they were organizing a kind of a movie night for the community in their coffee shop. And so you have to be I think, creative in rural Newfoundland if you're going to try to make a go of it year-round.
Okay, so, Joni, quick one?
Just quick, keep it small, that's more sustainable, and take advantage, make hay while the sun shines in the summer, but have something that appeals to community like beer.
I'll just be very quick here. I just one thing to think about, and that is diversification into other sectors of the economy which are not so seasonal, like small-scale manufacturing, innovative technologies, even crafts. I mean, so that'd be one thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Doug and Patty. So we have about 15 minutes, so I've got 4 hands at the moment. So what we're going to do is make the panel actually remember stuff, because we're going to do a final run through you all, and you can answer any questions you want and or do your wrap-up. So you're not going to answer after each question. That makes you think. Gentleman with the toque, first up.
Good evening. Thank you, Bob, and the panel for putting together this most informative and interesting discussion tonight. I'll try and be brief. We likely all agree that our province is facing very challenging times. Dare I say, an unprecedented period of financial austerity, highest per capita debt in the country, highest per capita health care in the country, so on and so forth. We have finite resources in this province, dwindling population, and by many econometric models will be 400,000 in 20 years. There's no bank on Water Street that will provide you a different loan-to-value ratio for doing something in rural Newfoundland as opposed to in urban centers. And that's consistent across the country. I'm living proof of it. So should not most any discussion that we have regarding any type of development of rural Newfoundland also include that of some form of resettlement, amalgamation, and most specifically the rationalization of existing governmental service delivery, specifically in rural Newfoundland? Where's the money coming from? How are we going to afford all this? Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to make our panel wait, although I know they're chomping at the bit. Lady behind you.
Hi, so my name is Julie, and I just would like to ask, so I sit on a lot of different tables in my community, on the LSD and the recreation chair, on fire committee, all that kind of stuff. I also run my own business. I am a transplant. I left Newfoundland at 18, came back 23 years later, and started my own business because I have a new lens. Well, actually, I already had the lens, but so show of hands in the room, how many people are involved in a social enterprise or have a business in Newfoundland right now? Okay. So the reason
For
why
those online, I'd say it's about a third, maybe a quarter.
Okay. So I made some notes, so I'm just going to read through them, okay? Don't hate me.
And you do need to be brief.
I'm going to be brief, don't worry. So to the gentleman from Pooch Cove, you can't create an entrepreneur, but you can plant the seed for an entrepreneurial startup by finding out the people in your community who have unique skills and unique skill sets that may be dying out in your community or within Newfoundland. So seek out those people and then plant the seed for business. Like, why don't you start your own business? Talking about shoulder season, I have 2 full-blown tours coming up, sold out, 5 days each, in May. And I also have another tour, 15 days in October. So those are people who, some of them from New York and some of them from Australia. So they're coming from all over the world, and they're not coming in the prime season. They're coming on the shoulder. Also, sorry, I want to ask. So how are you targeting this plan outside of the academics? Because I just found out about this, just happened to see it on Twitter today. I do know about PLACE, but I'm wondering how you're engaging the LSDs, which is my main product when I deliver people throughout the island for tours. How are you going to engage the LSDs? We don't want to become a municipality. We don't want to become a town. I've already addressed that and asked the people in my community. I'm like, hey, we got lots of revenue here. We have Newfoundland Hydro, but they don't want to move into that. And also, if you do want to get involved and you do want to create a social enterprise and look for opportunities, I would suggest that you look at your local destination management associations, like Legendary Coasts. They can come into your community and present what the opportunities we're seeking out in tourism, and they do some really great work. And yeah, so that's it.
Thanks a million. And again, panel, hang on to the ones you want to respond to. Gentleman with the blue shirt right at the back. Justin, sorry, before we come around the bend here.
Hello, my name's Draco Dunphy. I'm from Harbour, Maine. I'd like to say that I really like the P&DL and the place model. It's got to be said, no community project has ever gotten off the ground without community support. But I'd like to say about the tourism part, it's got to be said there's more than just tourism here. You got to realize it's not a game for a lot of us. I've been here in Harbour, Maine most of my life. Watched a lot of people moving away. It's real sad to see that. And, you know, there's lots of opportunities around, and but like, it's not just tourism here. You got people just trying to live their own lives. You know, you got to see the economy is not treating them so kindly. So I wonder, you know, what can you do besides just see it's great to see that you're having outsiders, but what can you do to really show people? Because what she said over there was really important. A lot of people don't realize the strength that they got within them. There's a lot of community leaders around that just don't know the opportunities at hand. I was fortunate enough to hear about this around an hour ago when I ran over from Munn. If you notice, I'm in me clothes that I wears for working out and stuff. So, I mean, I literally ran over around 6:15. But it's got to be said, what can you do to increase the awareness for youth to actually stand up and do something for the communities?
Thank you very much. Really glad you ran over. And gentleman in the middle with the beige shirt on. And then Kathy, if there's any last ones emailed in.
Oh.
Yep.
No. Sorry. Hi, my name's Bennett Newhook. I'm the Executive Director of Green Space Urban Farms. I work in the production of commercial-scale hydroponic urban farming systems, and I'm working on projects across the island and looking to expand throughout Labrador as well. And in my work, one of the things that I seek to do is incorporate our systems within existing infrastructure. Resources which many rural areas of the province have an abundance of. Many do not, but many do, and oftentimes it is public infrastructure that is either being underused or completely unused. So my question is, for anyone in the panel, if you have any insights into some of the factors that are stopping groups from accessing this public infrastructure to use for both business and also social ventures, and what can be done to minimize them.
Thank you. And over to Kathy. Do you have any? No? Oh, that gentleman there. I was trying to avoid him, actually. No, Justin, Neil, you can introduce yourself.
First time?
No, take the mic. I know you don't need it. We
My name
know
is
each other
Neil
well.
Dom with a company called Track Consulting, and I found your model very interesting. We've been working on a model we developed ourselves, actually, called Place Builder, that I've had talked to my good friends at Craig and Rob and the folks at Harris Centre has actually helped us develop the model. We ran the model once in the town of Portugal Cove, St. Phillips, and I can tell you that Place works. And the reason that so many people are coming to Newfoundland is because I feel of the quality of the places that are here, but also the quality of people that are in those places. I'd love to keep on blabbing, but I won't. But I got lots that I could tell you about all the work we've been doing all over Newfoundland. And we've tried to implement and incorporate place-based planning into it, such as the plan we did with Sonia and Council in Port Rexton. And we think the opportunities in Newfoundland are great. And we do feel as well that some people talked about planning and how important planning is, and it's critical. And what we've done with the model for place builders, Zita Cobb says, the most important thing is to do the first thing first. Mm-hmm. And I think this is where a lot of municipalities, municipal leaders get frustrated with plans, is that they don't say, here, what's the first thing? So we've incorporated what we call a community work plan into our model. So when we finish the integrated sustainability plan, we call it, as a component of Place Builder, we prioritize with the communities what the first thing is. So from the perspective of your place model, what we're finding is that tourism is the low-hanging fruit in Newfoundland for economic development, and it has broad-ranging benefits and implications from entrepreneurship to supporting immigration into the province. I just wonder, I know you're talking about doing a case study, I wonder if maybe the case study could become a pilot, and how you feel about tourism as being that economic development fruit that might be able to support your place model.
Thank you, Neil, and sorry I missed your hand. Sorry, I'm real quick, up here at the front, but you got to be like 30 seconds. Yes, boy, I hope so.
Thank you very much for the panel tonight and being able to come here. I think that Place has a real place here in rural Newfoundland. As a private business sector person, like the gentleman said, the CEO, the first office I ran into in St. Anthony, they didn't let me out. So we work closely with the 27 communities of the joint venture, or the joint councils. We announced today and Friday that as private sector, what we've done is a 3 partnership with Memorial University, Dr. Wade Locke, IBM Canada, and our company. And what we're doing is we're preparing an economic study for success. And what's involved over the next 12 months, working with Memorial University and privately funded, is what happens when success happens, like our port development, with the number of jobs and so on and so forth. So private business is actually making the investment and using the facilities and academia, like Memorial University, which is very important, and keeping the conversation going with initiatives such as what you're doing. Private business is looking for a place to invest, and Newfoundland and Labrador is a great place to invest. No question about it.
Thank you, sir. Very succinct. Okay, I'm going to let John go first in the wrap-up. I'm going to end with Natalie, and we'll work Craig, Sonia, Doug, Joni, back to Natalie. So get a mic in John's hand. And any of those comments, questions, or your own closing remarks, briefly.
I wasn't prepared to go first. But just a couple of things that occurred to me. I hear tourism is low-hanging fruit. One thing about tourism is that it brings money in from the outside. When that money is circulated within communities by social enterprises or by businesses that spend their money locally, and when that money stays in the community, then it's not a zero-sum game anymore. The question of finite resources, the resources aren't finite. There is money outside of Newfoundland that's looking to come here. Now that said, not every community has equal access to tourism. Infrastructure doesn't permit people to get to every part of Newfoundland with equal ease. And so some communities are going to have to find other ways to thrive. And maybe that's agriculture. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is. But part of the model is asking ourselves, what assets do we have that are underused? What things are sitting idle? What do we have that we could make work for us differently? A cottage hospital doesn't have to be a hospital. A building that's empty doesn't have to sit empty. A kitchen that can be certified as a commercial kitchen doesn't have to only serve school lunches 5 times a week. It may be repurposed for other things in the evenings. It may provide, so it takes an enormous amount of creativity. It takes a lot of work. It takes finding the people in the communities, wherever they are, that have an idea, that have something that they want to do, whether it's, a blacksmith forge or a hydroponic garden or whatever, and helping them realize that vision. The community champions that we've talked to, like Joni, for example, if she wanted to take her practice to Toronto and work as many hours at her practice as she works making something of the Bombay Hospital, she'd probably be a very wealthy woman. But that's not what she's about. And so there are no silver bullets. You know, it's hard work, it's creativity, it's figuring out what you've got, what you can do with it, and helping get other people on board, and interacting with the other people in the community to put your heads together. Nobody ever said it was going to be easy.
Thank you, John. Craig, responses to any of those questions or comments or final remarks?
Yeah. Gentleman from Harbour, Maine, thanks so much for running over here. I couldn't even run in from the parking lot, so I appreciate your enthusiasm and your energy. The one thing I will say, and I think you're right, it's rural Newfoundland is more than just tourism. Doug made that comment earlier, small-scale manufacturers, lots of other things that can happen. The point I want to make in defense of Place is that Place is a model for how to do things. It's not about tourism. They did a case study on a tourism application of the idea, and that's where the idea came out. But Place could be used to generate any social enterprise, you know, that makes cars or grows vegetables or whatever. So there's lots of opportunities out there. I think Place gives us another way to try to capture some of those opportunities, and it's brand new. Like, give it some time to spread. I think this is literally the first big sort of public discussion of the model. So if you're interested in it, if you're in an LSD and you want to find out how this could work for you, come talk to them. They'll actually tell you. In terms of amalgamation, resettlement, and all that kind of stuff, generally speaking, the research that we look at says that amalgamation doesn't work in terms of saving money. As someone we're fond of quoting has often said, councils are cheap, services are expensive. So you can eliminate all kinds of councils in this province. It'll cost the exact same amount of money to run all those communities. Resettlement, unofficial resettlement, is already happening. Rural-urban migration is happening all over Newfoundland and Labrador. It's happening all over the world. I guess my question is it really a feasible strategy to try to force that again on a population and all of the mechanisms you got to create to try to do that if it's happening slowly anyway? And I don't think it's a without question. Places change all the time. We keep forging ahead. We keep coming up with new ideas. I think it's lazy to simply say, that place ain't working, shut it down and move them out of there. There's better ways to do things than that. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Craig. Sonia. Yep.
The gentleman over here talked about bank, just stuck. Yeah, about. Yeah, like there's your challenges, or you're being treated the same as in an urban setting. So we just went through that experience, and you know, to get security for funding, we had to go through a commercial appraisal, and they didn't know how to do one on our building because it's such a special use, no comparables, and it just threw everyone in a tizzy, and it took us a lot longer, cost us more money, and it was a real challenge. And we're not the first ones to go through that. We're one of many, and so I just want to say I feel for you. I agree with you on that, but I mean, I wonder how we talked about at the workshop in November about creating this community is here with, talking about the place model and, people and social enterprises, kind of creating a place for people to come together online or come together so that we can all sort of learn about some of these very specific challenges and barriers and approach them with this place mentality or with this model but also be able to connect with each other in all parts around the province, because there will be these unique challenges that will come up that are like that we can talk about, and we can work together on and see how we can get some of those things identified and figured out, I guess, to help those challenges.
Thank you, Sonia. Over to Doug. Coming back to Natalie.
Okay, it's 9 o'clock. I'm going to apologize to the last 4 speakers who made a lot of good comments, but I can't comment on their comments at this point. But I will make one observation, which is now for something a little bit different in a way, but it's amazing to think that we've been talking about rural Newfoundland for 2 hours, and we've hardly said anything about the fishing industry. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine that happening 30 years ago in Newfoundland and Labrador? And I think we really have to pay close attention to how can we develop a sustainable fishing industry for the future in Newfoundland and Labrador, and a lot of the issues about what will young people be doing, what kinds of industries can we have other than tourism and so on, can be answered if we can develop a sensible long-term approach to how we should develop our fishing industry.
Thank you, Doug. Joni, your last responses and or comment.
1 minute? I get 1 minute?
No, you get about 35 seconds.
Okay. Okay. I'm from Toronto, but I chose to live here. The people who started the daycare in my community came from Toronto to St. John's and chose to move to rural Newfoundland. So there's a lesson there. Think about it. I think that collective impact and community-based research and social enterprise and all these things, and using the resources that we have, like Choices for Youth, what an organization that can draw and inspire youth and create such positive change. Food NL or Food First or whatever they're called. Like, I don't think tourism, we shouldn't be going for tourism as the low-hanging fruit. I think we should be going for agriculture, food sustainability. That would really be investing in our own health and community development. And really, the last point I was going to make, I was going to finish with inviting you all to come to the Cottage Hospital whenever you're out there. I'd love to hear your ideas and have a chance to chat more. And let's focus on developing Newfoundland's greatest natural resource, its greatest asset. And you know what it is. It's Newfoundlanders.
And Labradorians.
And Labradorians, and all that come from a ways who actually belong here because they belong here because place, it's about deep love and abiding faith. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have faith in it, right? And I haven't given up yet.
Thanks, Joni. Natalie, last responses to questions, comments, or your own concluding remarks?
I guess I just want to say that looking around the room and seeing all of these sort of familiar and new faces of people who really care about this place enough to have come here this evening and spent 2 hours of their week with us is really humbling. And the last thing I would say is let's keep these place dialogues going, because I think that together we can come up with some pretty cool solutions. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Natalie. So I have a few quick concluding remarks. For anyone interested in watching or sharing the recorded session, we digitally record all these sessions. With colleagues who are unable to attend, we'll be posting it on our website, and the link will be emailed out in the next edition of the Regional, or e-newsletter. If you're not on that, get in touch, we'll put you on it. We will be continuing the discussion related to the future of rural Newfoundland and Labrador in the next few Harris Centre events, and also in partnership with the Centre for Social Enterprise. This Friday, we have a synergy session on immigration in rural Newfoundland and Labrador. And the following Wednesday, April 3rd, we have a session on community-based fishing enterprises in Labrador. The link to register for those sessions can be found on the Harris Centre webpage. And in the meantime, the Harris Centre is doing its thing. We have thriving regions up and running in Labrador, 3 regions on the West Coast, and we'll be launching to this coming spring and summer and fall. Thank you for coming out this evening, those of you in the room, as Natalie mentioned, and those viewing online. A lot of passion in the room, and I'm sure online. A lot of ideas, a lot of commitment. And this stuff only works if people show up. And you got to show up in your community and make it happen. We got to share ideas. Really, again, as always, thanks to the Harris Centre and Emira Innovation Exchange staff, Justin, Ruby, Kathy, John. Thank you to Nicole Helwig and all the staff at the Centre for Social Enterprise and the Faculty of Business Administration for partnering with us on this and some more events coming up. And please join me before if you're in the room, still opportunity there. We don't have any more interesting drinks, including Port Rexton, but we do have coffee and cookies and some copies of Vital Signs and a load of amazing people in the room. So feel free to network some more. But please join me in thanking one last time great presentations and panel. Thanks again and good night.